りおしまい。
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
And your host on the right, Brock,
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. On this episode, as usual, we're talking about Dragon Ball, but that will soon change. We have some other ideas in the works that are coming very soon. But today, as usual, we're talking about Dragon Ball, and in particular, episode 111, which is called Roshi's Gambit. Before we get started, if you like what you hear in the show, please give us a like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We upload new episodes Mondays and Thursdays to YouTube and on Rumble, Tuesdays and Fridays. So please check us out on those platforms. Anything else to add, Brock?
No, I think I am very ready to get into the meat and potatoes of the changing of the world here.
Yes.
Because that's what this is about.
Here we go. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing we see, I did not separate, I'll go ahead and say this now, I did not separate my cutaways out because they're very, very small, and I just incorporated them in. And so the first thing we see is actually Oolong recognizing the disappearance of the two Dragon Balls that Piccolo swallowed. Bulma tries to call Roshi to no avail, and Launch ultimately points out that they are obviously together if all 7 Dragon Balls are in the same place.
Right.
This is important. We'll get to that. I just wanted to mention that real quick. But back at the, let's say, point of interest, Piccolo taunts Roshi using his blast to knock him down. However, Roshi stands tall and tells Piccolo that they have met before. And what I wanted to mention here is a couple of things. Oolong and Launch. I think you already know where I'm going with this.
Of course.
But Oolong being the one to point them out is the call to attention by the logo separated part of Bulma to her own invention, the Dragon Radar, to point out that the ability for the archetypal feminine to track down wisdom has been prohibited or inhibited in some way.
Yeah, and of course you would recognize that it is possible that they can be swallowed because we had a whole arc about
And what
Bulma
does that
sort
mean,
of coming
right?
to terms with that.
And what does that mean to swallow the Dragon Balls?
One connection I'd like to make with that's very similar is whenever they were essentially swallowed by the Red Ribbon Army, right? And the way that the Red Ribbon Army swallowed the balls or hid them within themselves was that they used a jammer, right? And it was almost as if the body of the army itself had swallowed it. Then there's also the idea of the swallowing inside of the Leviathan that we dealt with whenever she went underwater in the submarine and had to go sort of retrieve the ball from the belly of the beast, so to speak.
See, that's what I was gonna get at is that like Roshi can't swallow the balls.
Right.
Piccolo can because of what he is, that um he's able to incorporate the wisdom, not incorporate. He's able to take this wisdom and keep it from no, that's not even what I want to say either. I by encountering Piccolo forthrightly, he has made it such that that wisdom is attainable through him.
The only way
The
that is attainable in his presence
Yes,
is through him.
that's what I was
Yes.
getting at.
That
Trying to get
well,
that
he
out
is
of
the
me, right?
Leviathan. He is
Right.
the
Exactly. That's why
entity
he's
of
able to
chaos
swallow him.
that is actually swallowing up that wisdom and becomes the dragon. And we'll see sort of how that integrates into how he becomes the dragon and
Oh,
is
very soon, yes.
how he stacks up as a dragon-like entity.
And so, but Oolong pointing it out, and Oolong is the one to take note of it because of that, right? Oolong is that part of that masculine part of Bulma which she set aside that she treats badly, but
But
if she
needs.
would listen to him, sometimes he's right. He's on the right path. Like here, he definitely is. And because he's that masculine logos of Bulma, he recognizes that not only is the ability for the archetypal female to not be able to find that wisdom a danger, but the presence of a wisdom consuming beast existing in the first place. And that's all things that are kind of brought to the secondary crew's attention, because they haven't really grasped how serious this is, the changing of the world.
Yes.
Chaozu hasn't either. He's just there, but Tenshinhan has started to
Right.
piece it together.
It's almost because Tin Shin Han has started to piece it together that this is all happening, right?
Yes.
That or not Piccolo, that Tien stood on the precipice of sort of being able to pursue a path like King Piccolo to actually serve himself in that sense. And that, he grappled with it and now it has to be sort of manifest for him, right?
Well, it's manifest for him because his new let's say, father figure who's pointed out his flaws, Roshi, has his own flaws that need to be redeemed, which is
Right.
what the hero does. And that's what Ten Shinhan's trying to be now, is the hero. But we all know there's only one hero. And he's coming.
He's coming.
But not in this episode. Anyway, so I just wanted to touch on that back at Kame House because I think it gives us a little more insight and draws some connections where we need to. Additionally, Launch pointing out that they have met, that Roshi and Piccolo have met. She is the oldest one there. She's the most mature one there, and at that point, she kind of brings that to attention that it is a serious matter. And after that is when Bulma tries to call them and is like, "Hey, answer us, because you should be not fighting Piccolo, right?"
And ironically, the Dragon Balls have disappeared, and she is not able to hear back from the spiritual father when she calls out for him.
Exactly. Well, and another thing is, it seems like Launch is more or less okay with it. She's, let's say, not okay with like Krillin dying, but she's not as alarmed as Bulma. Bulma is way more alarmed because the archetypal female seeks refuge by the spiritual father, and we've seen that already. She stays at Kame House for that reason. She stays with her father, and she even lives with her father well into her adult life.
Yes.
So we know that. We know that that's Bulma's mode of being, and so when she can't call for. All right, so that was a technical issue. I hope there's not too much there that I have to cut out, but we'll see.
I do want to point out that Launch recognizes Roshi's nature better than, say, Bulma could anyway, because of Launch's integration as that mother figure, right? And so she understands that this is she has seen high enough sort of into the potential that Roshi has to understand that this is something that Roshi actually could potentially grapple with, right?
Right, and even if he doesn't, she understands that his spirit isn't the one that's meant to destroy Piccolo, even if she can't articulate that. It's it's interesting because of the way she treats this as compared to the way she treats Krillin's death, for example.
Right.
She almost kind of, and it is to say too, right, that the value of an innocent child's life, that potential should not be squandered, even let's say for the life of a master.
Right.
That principle is something that Launch has really grasped at this point, and so she's really not that worried about Roshi at this point. So just wanted to mention that about Kame House, and
Yeah, and this is a continuation of a theme that we see a
didn't
lot
even
with
mention
Kame House,
Yamcha.
because we'll have an action scene, a tense scene happening, and it keeps cutting back to Kame House as that scene or series of events is unfolding, and it always seems to represent that this is the other half of everything that's happening, right? Like if it's a conflict of king/father figures, then we have the unconscious here in the Roshi brain house, right?
Yeah, exactly, and there you can see Bulma desperately calling out for them. But back at this point of interest, where the wasteland, where Roshi and Piccolo are about to fight, is where they square off. They have some words as well. Roshi tells him that he has met him before, and Piccolo's kind of not amused by his solemnness. He doesn't seem scared of Piccolo, and that angers Piccolo as well. But he also knows about Piccolo and is still not scared of him, which makes Piccolo even more upset. And this is all to say we see Roshi here in like his top form, I would say, as far as being a strategist. He unnerves his opponent, right? He unsettles him first and makes him act rationally before actually doing what he has to do. And it's
Yeah.
almost a Musashi-ic. Mine's still on though, so it should be fine.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, there is an aspect of him that can intimidate Piccolo, and he knows that he can. And there's it's like a mirroring that's happening where he hides the balls as well, but he hides them in the earth. And when he does that, Bulma can still see them, right? They technically are still visible to the feminine spirit, but Piccolo hides them inside of himself. And so there's this uh this dichotomy between Roshi and Piccolo here, where it's sort of like a holy mode of being versus an unholy mode of being. And they're both these kind of like inheritors of fatherhood for, spiritual fatherhood for the earth, right? Where we know that ultimately Roshi is strength wise number one under the heavens until just recently, right? And I had talked earlier about, can Roshi cash the check? Can he actually be the one to nourish the spirit of the hero, right? And so this is what this conflict is about. Who is going to have wear the mantle of that spiritual father? Will it be Piccolo and his ability to demoralize and create malice in the way that he does, or is it going to go back to Roshi, who can inspire and do the opposite of that, right? And remoralize.
Right. So there was a sticking point that I had with what you were saying there about Piccolo being a spiritual father, but I think you mean like an unholy.
Yeah.
Right.
The
What I was going to
inverse in that
compare this
sense.
to actually is Gandalf's standoff with the Balrog. You have that. You have this evil seed of evil that's been placed here by divinity, right? In both cases, because as we know, Melkor, we haven't talked about Lord of the Rings, but in the Silmarillion, Melkor it used to be a god. Well, I guess he still was a god, and he's the one that creates the Balrogs to begin with. So it's a seed of evil like that. Now the Balrog isn't a 1-for-1 with Piccolo, because he would need to be more
A character.
yeah. But that idea of that of
That seed of evil can drag the
well, not only that, but also that the holiness of the sage or the spiritual father, right? The holiness of that is still a threat to this, even though they're not the hero, let's say. And it is a threat. Gandalf does eventually defeat the Balrog, but he dies because of it, right? Which is what we see here, which Piccolo is almost defeated by Roshi, and he would have died because of it if he had succeeded.
right.
Which is to say the world has changed either way, right?
Yes.
Because what you were saying, like, is it going to still be Roshi that nourishes the hero? It's like, no, even if Roshi wins here, it wouldn't be him.
That's true, but that would be the ultimate sacrifice that he could make for his student, which is to do what his master did for him, which set him on
But
the hermetic path ultimately to become the wise master.
I think because of how Goku is in relation to Roshi compared to how Roshi was to Mutaito, I think that the reason Toriyama has it go the way it goes to begin with is because it wouldn't help Goku for Piccolo to not be,
Right.
or to be sealed away.
It is a responsibility for Goku as a
now
spirit
it's
to
time
grapple
to
with, yeah.
confront it, right? Now is the time to confront it. It's the evil that has returned because
Yeah,
of
the return of the
locking
unholy king.
away, right? And now it has to be fully dealt with. And so that's what this arc is about, and that's why it's so important and not a waste at all. And we're going to get into more of the criticisms, I think, as we get further like into the divine water for sure. And so Piccolo's already getting nervous here before we even get to it. But let's go ahead and continue because we've already been skipping around. So, meanwhile, Goku is on his way to Korran's tower, looking a little worse for wear, like he's like mumbling about Korran, and Yajirobe asks him if Korran's a doctor, and he says no, he's a cat. And Yajirobe's like, man, he must have hit you pretty hard.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and we know, and that's perfect dramatic irony because we know, right, what is happening. That he's a cat that can heal Goku, but Yajirobe thinks he's crazy. And so Roshi back at this, I don't even know what to call this, wasteland? Back in the wasteland.
In the Badlands.
In the Badlands, there we go. Roshi reveals that his master was Mutaito, the one who trapped Piccolo years ago. Upon hearing this name, Piccolo goes bug-eyed. Huge bug-eyed sweat coming down. He starts freaking out. And just then Roshi tosses the jar, and he sees the jar. He's like, not the jar. And so Piccolo flees, only to be caught by the Mafuba. Roshi wrestles with the demon, but at the last minute, the jar closes before Roshi can seal him away. Having failed, Roshi issues a final threat that someone will rise up to defeat Piccolo. Then he dies. Goku, meanwhile, senses this miles away, but can't quite articulate to Yajirobe what has happened and why he's suddenly feeling upset.
All right, so this is the part where we have to define the Mafuba in coherent terms.
Yes.
Because this technique
it's a good time to.
Is very important to understand what Piccolo is. You know, because we've called him this seed of evil and, you know, this primordial evil in a sense. But what is the Mafuba in relation to that? What seals away evil? This is a continuation of the use of words, right? In that it's a technique that has to be a spoken word, and a technique it changes the world by using a spoken word as a definition of something, right? In the same way that the Kamehameha is a very low resolution of doing this, where you create order from chaos. This is something of a higher nature, right? Because we had talked a bit about how the technique is used to define what is evil, and in doing so, lock it away from being able to have an effect on the world.
Yes. We had previously spoken about exactly that. But one thing that I want to add is that the Mafuba, as far as we know in actual canon, none of this super bullshit, the Mothba kills you every time.
Yes.
So not only is it the magical words, but it's the sacrifice that's part of it that it has to do with the reason why I conceal evil away. So the human mind is best adapted to understand lessons through drama. That's why drama is real, like storytelling and drama is the oldest method of communication. Let's say, I mean, storytellers and storytelling circles were around before there were temples, before there were religions, before there were narratives, even. Let's say, it was
Right.
like stories. And that's because the best way to relay information to humans is that. I mean, unless they experience it on their own, but that's a hard sell for you to for everyone to have to experience all that, right? So when we get to that point where it is the human mind being told in the story of it being the sage or the spiritual father sealing away evil through his categorization of it and sacrifice to that ideal. Those are the things those are the two tenets that have to make up the Mothba. And so you can see this, let's say, even in Lord of the Rings. Gandalf's sacrifice there is exactly it's almost Mophabic. I'm making up words.
Mafubic.
I'm really making up words.
No,
This
okay,
stream.
so I agree with what you're saying because I think it is a result of the wise sage's recognition and taking of responsibility for the inevitable seed of evil that is inside of himself. And so through his self-sacrifice, he seals away the evil
Because
as a
he's shown
concept.
that as an individual, he is able to overcome it. And so if he's able to, he's uplifted the spirit of humanity to be able to.
Right.
And that's why it seals it away. And so specifically what the Mothba is the categorization of evil by the spiritual father, the admission of that existing, and the sacrifice to that ideal of it being bad
Mm-hmm.
is the Mothba. Those kind of three things make up what that attack
Right.
actually
And the
is.
way that it works, right, is that he is sealed away in a container, the Dinshi jar. And there's a piece of paper over it as a seal, right? That's sealing him away that's got a symbol on it to represent I don't know what it says actually, but it
Daimo seal.
says Daimo seal. It's a demon seal, right? You can look at I think this is what's happening. Okay, I think
Well,
we're back.
we're back.
But the codification of this story into something that you could read, that you could look at and understand and interpret as wisdom, is the thing that seals him away. Like you were saying with the oral telling of
Yeah.
stories, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's why I called
That's
the
why I had to.
Kamehameha
I
a
wanted to put the
low,
context.
a low resolution articulation of the same idea, right? Because
Well,
through a higher and higher and higher resolution, it's almost like the Bible, right?
I don't know that the Kamehameha is a lower resolution of it, because the Kamehameha, like we've said, is that which makes order from chaos by using magical words, categorization, right,
Yeah.
naming things to distinguish truth and reality.
The
That,
Mafuba is naming a pattern of being.
but the Kamehameha has that ability has no, the upper limit is higher, let's
Right.
say, than the upper limit of the
I
Mothba.
see what you mean. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
But yeah. But I agree, like, this is very much and I like too that it comes from Mutaito, because it shows that tradition has followed into the turtle school, because we can assume that the Kamehameha was made after him seeing the Mothba, right?
Yeah. I
And
hadn't really considered it in a timeline like that.
yeah. And so we can see that is like the next expansion of it. And the generation that comes after Roshi is going to have to deal with some of these problems. And that's exactly what it is, what we're seeing here. And so that's what the Mafaba specifically is. And so when Roshi's wrestling with the demon, it's really a wrestling of him trying to pin down all that is evil and seal it away. Another thing I want to mention is I like that it's a rice cooker, and I think we mentioned this before, with the one that was like had bunnies all around it. But the idea that this one's like a new aged one, it looks like an updated one.
Hmm.
It's almost the next generation of it, but it also holds that which nourishes rice, and in this case, Piccolo.
True.
Which just goes to show that that symbolism is not paralleled, but
Well, I want to tie it into um, another type of mythology that we've talked about, right? Which is like Osiris, who is the god of rebirth and basically death, rebirth, and harvest, right? And is a spiritual father who is blind, who dies and goes to the underworld and paves the way for a more heroic spirit to be able to do things, right?
mm,
And but being the god of harvest and it being a rice cooker it kind of reminds me of that, where it's like the place that spiritual father would seal away the spirit of evil is sort of, how would you say, it's representative of the rejuvenating process of regrowth that Osiris represents, right? And it has to do with the death and then birth of a new sort of generation, right? Death, rebirth, death, rebirth.
yeah, and that the sealing away of the evil too, I think, is almost an impediment in a way to the hero's growth. But it's a power that we've seen Roshi use before in destroying the moon. But that's because Goku is not ready to face the fact that he killed his own grandfather.
Right.
But he is ready for this.
Well, he's almost ready for this.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see very soon. So we mentioned the jar. The threat that Roshi has in the end is like one of the biggest white pills. Like, it doesn't even matter. Roshi has just killed himself, but he still has faith in humanity. And that's another thing that sticking to that principle, using the Mafaba, has allowed himself to transcend and actually
Well, he can't be demoralized by Piccolo.
he will. Yeah, exactly. And by not doing so, he's moralized Ten Shinhan, let's say.
That's kind of the dichotomy I was trying to point at. Is like there's a
Yeah.
demoralization versus a remoralization orientation here.
And even though he fails,
Right.
he's victorious. This is almost a strike me down, Darth, and I'll be more powerful than you can ever imagine.
Yeah, it is in that sense because he is representative of a higher idea than just himself now because he's a teacher.
Well, and I mean, we've known him as a teacher, the master of martial arts, but now he's really fulfilling his role as the spiritual father, which must in turn lay down and sacrifice itself for the spirit of potential, let's say.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. That's really what all of the, let's say, younger martial artists, that's all what Roshi sees in them is really that point, that potential. And he's sacrificing himself for the spirit of their potential. And that's why it's a holy act that moralizes Tenshinhan. And then
Yeah.
he dies, which is sad. And Goku senses it, which is the first time Goku really senses anything. And I think there's multiple reasons for this. I think one of them is Goku's mapping of Roshi's spirit onto his own as much as he can before having to grow past it. Because he did what Krillin has continually, let's say, reviewed. And that first time he got all he learned from Roshi. And he became very close with Roshi because of the value that Goku could inherently see in the teachings that were there, right? The spiritual value in following that and allowing him to be on the right path let's say, giving him the Nimbus, all that kind of stuff. That coupled with the idea that the hero being nourished by the spiritual father would be able to recognize that, let's say, separation and link, or that severing of the link. And now Goku can sense, and it's almost a thing where life's never the same, and it's almost one of those catastrophic events that happens in a person's life where they know that something's wrong, and they know that it's not going to go back to the way it was. And he can't even articulate what's happened to Yajirobe because he doesn't know that Roshi died. It's not Toriyama doesn't just like go to the furthest extreme and say Goku can now just sense what's happened, but he gets an intuition to it. And I think it's because, especially at this moment when his flaws have been laid bare to him and he's beaten up and open and vulnerable to the world, I think that's one extra reason as to why he can sense what has happened with Roshi. But I'll let you go ahead.
No, I think that you're right. That Goku is in a state where um he needs to be healed by somebody else. And
Well, he needs
he's
spiritual
sustained
healing.
yeah,
Right?
he sustained a wound that simply just eating, right? The normal form of eating probably wouldn't be able to heal him up properly because he's been spiritually damaged. And because of that, he has been laid low to the point that this is sort of an outward representation of what a spiritual blow towards the hero looks like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so Goku, it's, he's got this intuition that the world has changed in the same way that he had the intuition that things were going to change when Krillin left and didn't join him, right? And
Exactly the same.
yeah,
Right, exactly.
and I think it's similar because whenever he had that intuition, he was also starved and hadn't eaten after the world tournament.
His vulnerabilities were laid bare just the same way, right?
Yeah,
And so when he's in that state, after he's confronted chaos, and this also happens too, let's say with working out. Once you've reached your limit in working out, you've reached, let's say, your max reps or whatever. After that is the maximum time when your muscles regrow and become stronger. And that's actually the time when you're supposed to take protein and uh, make sure that you have all your nutrients for your muscles, because that's whenever they're regrowing.
right.
And that's why Goku's really open right now, because he's in a regrowth process. Like you're saying, the cycle of
Yeah.
growth and rebirth.
Let's see. Here's the thing. Here's the catch: is that this Osiris figure did not seal away evil in his cyclical rice cooker harvest
Yeah.
ritual that he does, right? And if
Well,
he had, it would be the thing that would rejuvenate the hero, and he would, you know, that would be it. But it is the flaws in Roshi that instead shows that it is inevitable for the hero to have to contend with this specific sins of the
I
father,
definitely
right?
agree with that. Yeah.
And so, uh, the fact that Roshi, because of his humanity, is not the man that Mutaito was, is the reason why the archetypal hero is necessary for a story like this.
But Roshi's difference in the teaching of the logos and the way are the reasons why his student will be successful, where Mutaito's student was not.
Yes.
Because Mutaito never sent Roshi out to travel on the road.
Well, Roshi,
unless you include the filler. But that's the thing. I don't know. Filler's pretty good these days.
Roshi embraced the Hermetic way for a much longer time than
Yes.
Mutaito from the looks of it, right?
Yes.
We don't know if Mutaito had, let's say, climbed Korin Tower.
He hadn't. We know he didn't, because Korin has been there for 800 years and only one other person has climbed the tower.
Right.
So yeah, we know.
So we do know that he hadn't, right? So there's a spark there that I think inspires part of what Roshi is able to teach that his master was not able to teach.
No, I agree. I definitely agree. It's just it's interesting to see that generational improvement,
Yeah.
let's say. And that's actually echoed too with what we see in Goku later on, but we'll get to that in 10 years. Okay, I think we'll move on. So, with Roshi dead, Piccolo. Piccolo is
King
what I was.
Piccolo, yeah.
King Piccolo. King Piccolo thinks he has nothing more to fear, gloating over the corpse of Roshi and laughing. He then retrieves the Dragon Balls from underground and summons Shenlong to make his wish. The Eternal Dragon rises as Tien and Chaozu are forced to look on, and that's actually where the episode ends. So, a couple of things here. Piccolo says now he has nothing to fear because no one else knows the Mafuba.
He assumes.
And it's to say that the destruction and confrontation of evil isn't only done by the spiritual father. Piccolo has not engaged with a heroic spirit, though, besides Goku, but he is not properly prepared yet, as we'll get into in the coming episodes. But the fact that he mentions he has nothing more to fear after dealing with Roshi shows a little bit of the insight as to the unholiness being the arrogance that he has and the deceit, right? Because we know Piccolo can't honestly think that no one else will rise against him. One. And two, him thinking that he can get away with what he's doing forever shows that arrogance.
Right. Well, he thinks that he's achieved the ultimate
And
demoralization.
we're going to see
so
some resentment in a minute once we get to the next
Oh,
episode.
yeah. Well, this is the thing, though. He thinks that he's performed the ultimate demoralization by defeating the spiritual father in the way that he has. And what he doesn't understand is that this spiritual father has taught a way that transcends that demoralization. That
His spirit
lives on. Yeah.
Strike me down, Darth, and I'll become more powerful than you can ever imagine. It's the same motif, let's say. And so, we do get to see Shenlong like rise up, and Pilaf's amazed by it and all that. As we know, Pilaf is in love with the dragon, infatuated with the idea of it, but can't actually retrieve the wisdom inherent because of his foolish nature. But I think the last thing showing Tien and Chaozu, really, it's to show what we're gonna kind of get into next, and that's how, without the spiritual father, what kinds of decisions are the heroes now going to make?
It's their world now.
It's their world now. And so I think that's a good place to top it off. So
yeah.
If you like this episode, please give us a like. Subscribe to our channel. I think this one actually went 40 minutes. Which is longer than I thought we were, but we only had 3. But anyways, give us a subscribe. We upload new episodes Mondays and Thursdays, YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays to Rumble. Check us out on both of those platforms, if you would, please. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
And we hope you guys enjoyed the episode and have a good night.